The Print Off the Cuff with Shekhar Gupta.
Welcome to this very unusual episode of Off the Cuff. Unusual because I have three celebrities who aren't quite celebrities in the sense that you come to see them defined. These are three wonderful, brilliant, successful entrepreneurs and investors who've also chosen philanthropy. And philanthropy specifically focused on education, and they're also higher education. It's not just to set up a primary school somewhere. They've done something that you have to be really brave to do, to set up a genuine non-profit, academically oriented university, full scale, full scope, broad spectrum university. That is Ashoka University. So from left to right, Sanjeev Bikhchandani, Ashish, Dhawan, Pramath Sinha. I will not waste time giving you their descriptions. You will see them on the screen and you can all Google. Plus, you don't have to Google because you know them and it'll take too much time. So let me not waste any more time. Any of you can take this. That's how we are talking. Or all of you can see this. What madness seized upon you that you decided to set up a university?
Actually, Sanjeev approached me. I knew Pramath, of course, and the example of creating ISB. Pramath had been the founding dean. And Sanjeev approached me in 2007 with the idea that we should set up a new university. He had been to St. Stephen's. He felt that Delhi University had started to stagnate and that we needed a new kind of university in India. I had been to Yale undergrad and firmly believed that a 21st century education requires you to have breadth and depth, and for students really to be much more sort of well-rounded, well-read, etc. And immediately after we met and both felt that this was a good idea, we went to Pramath because he was the one person we knew who had built an institution before us. And that's how we came together to build Ashoka University.
I think we have to thank the principal and the management of St. Stephen's College for the initial sort of stimulus. So in 2007, St. Stephen's College announced a 50% reservation with
Anil Wilson, was it?
it was Walsan Thampu, with a 35% gap between the general cutoff and the reserve cutoff, which the alumni felt was too high. You can't have a 35% difference in the cutoff. It will be academically disastrous for St. Stephen's. And so while we tried to speak to the management, we did not make much headway. So then a group of us got together and said, we've got to start a new college. But that effort petered out after 2-3 meetings. And, then I went to Ashish and I said, it's time to do a new university. And we should do it along the American lines. So in India, we've inherited the British system where you choose a subject and you study in a silo and just that subject. And in the US, you study width. You study 6-7 different disciplines, and then you decide your major. And we said, maybe it's time to do a different university. So I went to Ashish and I said, this is an idea. And I was put on to Ashish by one of our independent directors, Mr. Arun Duggal. He said, listen, you've been talking about this in Stephen's College thingy. Why don't you speak to Ashish? He's interested in education. So I went to Ashish, and I knew Ashish from before. So I said, "Ye idea hai," and he said, "Sounds good. How much money do you think it'll take?" So I just took a number out of my hat, and I said, "I think we can do it in 25 crores." So he said, "Very good. How much will you put?" I said, "I'll put 5 crores." He said, "Okay, I'll match you 5 crores. I'll get 5 crores of Puneet Dalmi, and 10 crores kahin aur se le aayenge. 25 crores mein university kar denge." Okay, and so we started with that simple idea. Okay, abhi I think 3500 crore commit ho gaye hain, and there's the target to raise 3000 crores more. So it's always, if we had known that then, in 2007, we would not have done this. But I would not have done this. It was 35 crore lagenge, but bit by bit, we kept moving forward. And I think we went to Pramath, and Pramath did a few meetings with us. And Pramath was at the same time meeting a bunch of people who were ex-IIT, Delhi, who were saying we want a technology university. And Pramath said, listen, you guys will fail doing a university. They will fail doing it if you are separate. Why didn't you come together? Then we came together, a bunch of us, and we decided to do it.
Pramath, you had set up an institution first, ISB. How is this different from that?
So very different. You see, ISB is really one program. It is an MBA program. It's a 1-year MBA program. It's many more things now, 25 years almost later, but it's really one program. And the big thing about ISB that is very different is that it's not under the purview of any government regulation. A lot of people don't understand this, but
Right.
it's a non-profit company actually that offers a 1-year certification. Here you have a full scale university with multiple departments, majors. You have an undergraduate program where you have the responsibility of taking care of a young person for 4 years, whereas you are there doing a 1-year program. Here you have to do all of the things that Ashish and Sanjeev talked about. You have to give them breadth, you have to give them depth, you can give them choice, flexibility. And so that adds a whole different level of scale and complexity. We have 3,000 people living on campus today. It's a city in Sonipat. But the biggest complication in all of this, besides just the scaling and the multifacetedness of it, is that this is completely under both state and central education, higher education regulations. A lot of people don't understand that there are no real private universities in India. There are only government universities or licensed by the government to operate with private funds, with some autonomy, but with lots of controls and regulations, which ISB does not have to contend. So we are a Haryana state university, a Haryana government education official sits on our board.
With a specific law passed.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you are technically under the purview of the government. The government can decide how much you charge as fees. The government can decide how you admit people and so on. We have a lot of freedom, and we are very fortunate to have had that. But it's a completely different kettle of fish. So much so that for 25 years, the big debate on the ISB board has been whether we should do a university at all. Over there, I'm on the other side of the debate saying, no, let's just stay with just our MBA program because we can really build this into a standalone business school. But here, it's a completely different kettle of fish. So there were lots of learnings, but very different.
And by you have undergrads here, as you said, at ISB, almost all your students have had prior experience.
Absolutely.
So they've had at least 2 years experience.
Correct, correct. And there's a very large research component here as we are building our PhD program. You know, a large university cannot be counted in a great university of the world, which is our aspiration, unless you really do scholarly research work. And so the emphasis on research as a university, having a very strong PhD program, or add further complexity to what we are trying to do here.
Ashish, you worked both in school education and you've set up this university. You was one of the founders. What's the difference and what's the different motivations for both?
Sure. So I think school education is much more regimented in a sense. It's the early days, and I work more on primary education where, the objective really is to get children foundational literacy and numeracy. I think with higher education, students come in and you want to give them much more choice, much more variety, allow them to explore. And you want to prepare them not just for the job market, but for life. Different students will pick different paths. And this is the opportunity for them to really discover themselves and figure out. It's the first time they're living away from home. It's the first time that they're exploring subjects they've never been exposed to in school. It's the first time they're encountering someone who's very different from them. Schools are very homogeneous, whereas universities are much more heterogeneous. Not only do we have students from 300 towns and cities across India, from 25 countries across the world, but half our students are on some form of scholarship or financial aid. So you could be a student from South Delhi rooming with a student from Jharkhand who is the son of a farmer, somebody you would have never been exposed to earlier. So I think it shapes people in a very, very different way, because universities pull in students from around the world, from around the country, versus schools, pull in students from a 5 kilometer radius. So it's a whole different experience, and it's a whole different
even
exposure.
the parents mostly know each other.
They know each other. Yeah, it's a small little microcosm, very homogeneous. Whereas this is it's a much more complex space. It's a much more exciting space, I think, in that sense.
So does any of you regret having done it?
No,
There are good days and bad days, but I think overall we're okay.
There are moments, but no, not at all.
No, and I think universities are complex. They are not like typical corporate organizations. They're not as hierarchical as a organization. Even a vice chancellor in a university doesn't have the same control that a CEO does in a company. Academics are
Most
free.
universities, vice chancellors have no control.
Have limited
We've seen
control.
this play out in the US right just now.
Yeah.
Presidents have been.
But having said that, Shekhar, I think if you look at great universities around the world, it's not like they've had their fair share of problems, controversy. But I think at the core, if you have good faculty and a good governance mechanism, it endures in the long term and delivers good results.
So Sanjeev, define a good day and a bad day from experience.
No. So I think most days are good days. A bad day would be, listen, there is some controversy in the media about Ashoka, and then I ring up Pramath and Ashish and say, "Bas, ye kya ho gaya?" Okay, how did this happen? Okay, and that's a bad day.
Shoot the messenger. Even Rohit Sharma in his self-exculpation said, जो माइक लेके घूम रहा है, जो लैपटॉप पे बैठा हुआ है, जो पेन और पेपर लेके बैठा हुआ है, वो नहीं डिसाइड करेगा मैं खेलूंगा कि नहीं खेलूंगा. It's always the media. But something happens, so it gets in the media.
Yes.
The media gets interested.
Yes.
Otherwise, why would the media be interested?
Absolutely.
On a campus? So, I'm carrying your answer
Well,
forward.
listen, let me put it this way. What I don't want happening is it becomes like Calcutta University in the late 60s or early 70s. So politics is great, but we don't want that kind of thing.
Campus politics. So, since you started, you founded this 10 years ago. In fact, that's the reason we are talking now. And thank you very much for finding the time. And since you started imagining this, has your conception and idea of what university education is in India changed?
Mine? Yes, it has, because I come from a corporate sector, I'm an entrepreneur. I find that stuff is a lot less controllable than I had imagined before we started. Right? Private companies are different. It's a lot of most stuff is in your control. Here it is more, people do what they want, and then you got to live with it.
Each one of you?
Go ahead, Ashish.
Yeah, I think it's maybe reinforced my belief, Shekhar. I think we started out very naively, as Sanjeev said, not quite sure of how much money it would take in philanthropic capital to build this, how complex it would be, how long it would take. It's only been a decade now, but I believe it'll take us another 15, 20 years to be even close to world class. We may be good in the Indian context, but we're still far away from the frontier. I mean, in terms of research, a top PhD program, lots of things need to be done. So it's still in the process of being made. But I firmly believe that if I look further out, 15, 20 years out, that some of the best institutions in India will be private universities. Amongst the top 20, at least half will be private, 15, 20 years out. And Ashoka has been a pioneer in interdisciplinary education. And we want 100 flowers to bloom. We're a non-profit. We want others to copy this template of collective philanthropy, of building an institution that focuses on research and teaching. So it's reinforced my belief that despite all the constraints, there is a silver lining, out there.
I think, Shekhar, I'm even more convinced that we have an opportunity in India to build things in education that are truly world class from day one. I was, even having done ISB, I was healthily skeptical because, as I told you earlier, ISB was in a sense, a one-trick pony, right? You just one program, MBA, and so on. But having seen what we've been able to do at Ashoka, and I agree with Ashish, we have a long way to go. I would say we are still 15, 20 years away from really making a mark to be counted as a great university. I think that I can see that it's possible to do that. One of the big learnings, and I think I had an inkling of it, but it's gotten reinforced, is that how you govern, how you run things, and the leadership is really the biggest determinant of how good your outcomes are going to be. And I think that's true for both public and private. Who calls the shots? How do you appoint the vice chancellor? How involved are the owners versus sharing the governance and decision making, which is what we have, in a sense, I would say, pioneered this whole idea of collective philanthropy. It's not Bikhchandani University or Dhawan University.
So can I just tell you something? One of the early decisions we took, and I think I must, attribute that to Pramath, is that no matter how much money you donate, you will have only one seat on the board, right? So Ashish may give 20x the amount of money I give, but we will both have one seat on the board. Now, what that does do is that it ensures that it's not one person's university, one person does not have too much power. There's a collective kind of thing at the board level. What this means is that you get much more academic independence because one person can't decide. So this may lead to some inertia sometimes, but one person can't decide. It cannot be get this guy out.
And if you look at the
everybody gets termed out eventually.
That's the GST principle that Tamil Nadu is complaining about. That they have one vote and Sikkim has one vote. The GST council.
Yeah. But setting it up that way, one of the things we realize, if you look at the great universities of the world, nobody owns them. Who owns them? Nobody. Yet, everyone, including the last student who graduated, feels like it's their university. So how do you create that culture, that value, that feeling, that emotion is really at the heart of it. There's no some Mr. Gupta sitting on top calling the shots. And I think that has been the crux, and that learning has gotten really reinforced through the Ashoka.
University brands take a long time. People who founded Harvard, Oxford, Cambridge, they didn't know, they didn't anticipate what will happen 800 years, 600 years hence. So this is institution, it's a patient investment in a way, the most patient of all.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a long-dated patient investment. And I would posit that as India rises, universities out of India also will get stronger over time. While we may feel like, the best talent doesn't necessarily want to come back to Indian universities, I think on the margin it's changing. I think we see, whether you look at the IITs, there are some people who graduate with PhD programs from Stanford and MIT who do come back. Even at Ashoka, we've managed to get people with PhDs from the very top places, top 10, top 15 institutions globally, who've come as faculty, full-time here. And I believe that's only the beginning of a much bigger tide as we go forward. Partly because the supply exceeds demand in the Western world. And so I think a lot of demand will get absorbed by universities in emerging markets.
How concerned are you, or you see that as an opportunity? So many Indians school pass outs now, particularly from elite schools, going sort of by the wagon load for undergrad education overseas.
Yeah.
Our education, just undergrad education import now is humongous.
So it's a huge foreign exchange drain.
Yeah.
But Shekhar, I look at it another way. If you look at the number of undergrads who go to top 20 universities in the US, it's only 700 in number every year. Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford only take 15. A university like Cornell maybe takes 40, 50. On average, it's like 30, 35. You multiply by the top 20, it's 600-700 students in total. So it's a very, very small number of students who go abroad to the top places. And we are 10 years old now. We've already had students turn down places like Duke or Urbana-Champaign,
Stanford,
LSE, Berkeley to come to Ashoka. So I think the tide is, again, it's happening only on the margin. Most students would prefer to go abroad. But I think students are now aware that there are options in India, options like Ashoka, which are comparable to some good university. Obviously, if they get into Harvard, they're going to pick Harvard over Ashoka. But if they get into another institution where they believe that, it's sort of comparable, they would rather get their undergraduate education here if they're going to live in India long term and build a career here.
See, 99% of Indian students can't afford a foreign education. They will have to be in India, so they already apply, right? Ashoka, even if you pay full fees, is less than a fourth,
A sixth,
or maybe a sixth of the cost of a good overseas university. So there's a financial angle. Academically, I would say, look, and I've always said this to students, that if you want to study social sciences, there's a context and there's a concept. You can learn the concepts in the US but if you want to learn about Indian society, Indian economy, Indian history, it's best to learn in India. So actually, I would say there's a very, very good sound reason for Indian students to prefer, even if they can afford overseas, to prefer to be in an Indian university. And I always tell young people this, that देखो अगर आपको भारत में हिंदुस्तान में रहना है, right, it's important that you have your networks within India. Your networks are built in your college and your postgrad. And अगर आपको बाहर जाके रहना है long term, then maybe. But by and large, most Indians live in India. There may be an aspiration, but they most end up living in India. And therefore, it's good to have networks in India. Therefore, it's actually better to study in India if the institution is good.
And sorry, if I could just add one, I think while we have a long ways to go in terms of improvement, I think for us, one data point is there have been students who've gone to places like Berkeley, St. Stephen's, all these places for their first year and actually transferred to Ashoka afterwards. For whatever reason, either they felt that Ashoka was a better place to come, or it could be that they were not comfortable being in the institution they were in. And what they tell us, the experience is as good, if not better, than some of the global institutions they were at. So I feel pretty confident that from a teaching standpoint, we're comparable. From a research standpoint, from a PhD program standpoint, we still have a long ways to go.
Setting up a university and running it, there are three demographics that you have to deal with. One is the funders, the contributors, investors, donors, whatever you call them. Second is faculty, and third is students. So you have to carry out three sets of recruitments, right?
And fourth is the government.
Government, you don't recruit.
Yeah.
That's the environment.
That's a stakeholder you're going to manage.
That's the environment management.
Yeah.
But of the three sets that you have to go out and recruit, which has been the most challenging? Because each one has to have certain quality standards.
The most challenging one across the world is the faculty one. I mean, that is the secret sauce, call it the magic power that you need to build great universities. And you do have that in short supply, and you have global demand for that faculty. So when you ask the question about students going abroad, at Ashoka we are not too concerned about that. That actually helps us. It's not such a great thing for the country perhaps, but that's a different issue. But the real thing is that we are now already competing globally for a faculty member who's looking for an academic position. What will it take for us to get them to India, to Delhi, to Sonipat is really the biggest challenge, and it will remain our biggest challenge, because today we are about 170 full-time faculty. We will grow to about 500 full-time faculty over the next few years. This journey is going to be really challenging, and to constantly raise the bar, to constantly retain, attract, grow faculty members.
Is that tougher than recruiting donors?
It is.
Let me put it this way. Ashish is probably the best fundraiser in the world. Okay, so and he has built this great team that is able to get people to contribute financially. Pramath is doing a tremendous job among the three of us, working with the vice chancellor and the deans and the chancellor and other faculty members to get faculty. And yes, that's a slightly harder job, but I think Ashoka has done a very good job of it. Right? To some extent, we were also aided, in my view, by the fact that, look, there are a large number of academics globally of Indian origin. Very many of them want to come back or have one foot in India. It's also true that, look, if you are academic in social science and humanities, there aren't so many great places to come back to in India. I mean, it's not like engineering, where there are 8 IITs or 5 IITs or 10 IITs. right? And you're competing with them for faculty. So Ashoka is actually a very good place to come back to. If you're in social sciences, humanities, or pure sciences even, to come back and work. So I would say, look, it's all challenging, but it's okay.
But haven't you shifted emphasis now from social sciences and humanities
Absolutely.
to sciences?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I wouldn't say shifted, we balanced out. The plan was always to be a full university. We only started with humanities, social sciences. We then got into the sciences. And it took a little bit of time, Shekhar, because, in any field, you need to build some critical mass of senior people first. So our vice chancellor, for instance, is a physicist, and we have 3-4 senior physicists who are from top-notch places. Similarly, in mathematics or in bioscience, in chemistry. And now that we have that, we're able to attract fantastic younger faculty as well. So we've got a fairly strong sciences program. If you look at actually our second most popular major now is computer science, and our fourth most popular major this year is bioscience. And I think it's just a function of the
And
fact
which is the most popular?
economics is the most popular. So it's just we wanted always to be a full university with departments across the humanities, social sciences, science, computer science, data science, even some aspects of entrepreneurship in business as well at the undergraduate level. That was all part of the initial plan in terms of having multiple schools that cover all these disciplines.
So let me put it this way. If you see, we said we will follow the US model of a liberal arts university. Now, in the US, liberal arts includes natural sciences. It does not include engineering, does not include medicine, but it includes natural sciences, and which is where we've gone, actually. So this is not something new that we've done.
Yeah,
But actually includes engineering even.
Yeah.
I mean, at a Harvard, which is considered liberal arts, or Princeton, you have a degree in engineering also.
Yeah. But STEM is sort of safer territory than humanities and social sciences, particularly in the Indian political context.
But that's not the reason, Shekhar. I mean, if that were the case, we would not have done. Why did we start with humanities, social sciences? I think we knew that science is harder because it takes more money. So initially, when we had limited money, to build a science program is very difficult because you need to make the investment in labs and a lot of physical infrastructure. Every person you hire, there's almost like a starting research program that you need to invest in, new equipment, things like that. So because of the capital intensity of the sciences, we chose to tackle it later. But the plan was always to be a full university.
Right.
It's not that we pick SEM because it's safer. We believe in interdisciplinarity, that magical things happen at the intersection of disciplines. And so having the full suite of disciplines was very, very important for us.
So देखो, शुरू में पैसे नहीं थे, कम थे. We were not confident how much you can raise. So we said, okay, economics, history, political science, those kind of subjects, they're not expensive labs. You pay for the salary, the research is, what's in the guy's
And
head.
classrooms.
And what's in the person's
And
head.
library.
Yeah, that's right. Then, as we got more confident of raising more money, and more money came in, and we got more support, we said, okay, we can now start experimenting with some natural sciences and invest in labs. To get a good prof, you'll say, boss, I will give you this lab that will cost 6 crores, and I'll give you this annual budget of so much. That's how they come, because they have to do the work. And so it costs money.
Because I see global competition for good faculty. One of the things on offer is also how many scholars can I give you?
Headcount?
Yeah.
Headcount. I mean, we've just got this Zeiss thing.
The microscope.
Microscope has cost some 50 crores. Okay. Now, we couldn't have dreamt of it 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But around that, you're going to attract many more people.
And I think we also feel strongly that if you look at, like, say, something like pure science, while we have top-notch engineering programs in the country at the undergraduate level, we're quite weak in pure science in India. I mean, if you look at
That's
a
true.
university...
Pure science has declined.
Yeah,
it's
actually,
been replaced by technology and engineering.
And Shekhar, if you look at China, pure science is actually very strong. I mean, one of the reasons China has a very strong program in material science, nanotechnology, biotechnology, is Tsinghua is or all their leading institutions. And for a student who's good at physics or good at bioscience or good at chemistry, they don't feel the need to necessarily switch to engineering, which has been the case in India. So I think bringing back the pure sciences, the applied sciences is very, very important.
But you did get burnt a little bit with social sciences and humanities to begin with.
burnt in the...
because it's politically edgy and
I think, see, that's because, again, and this is going to sound again like the case of shooting the messenger, because that's what shows up in media largely, right? But if you ask me,
you know what happens on the ground shows up in media.
No, fair
Then you
enough.
might say media covers it
yeah.
in a way that you see it as fair around. That's different. But
No, so I'm not blaming the media.
Yeah.
All I'm saying is that there's enough going on which is not, or which is very safe in your words, which these are outlier incidents that seem to make it not easy or
I know,
difficult.
but campuses have a challenge. I mean, liberal campuses have a challenge. In
Yes.
the most liberal world,
Yeah.
right? We've seen Gaza protests. So how do you protect, or how do you ensure that a place like Ashoka also did not get caught up
Yeah.
in the Gaza?
So I think
Anger.
what we have always tried to do, Shekhar, is say that, listen, you are free to say whatever you want. We will not stop you. And that's why the controversies happen, right?
I see your students' publications.
That's
It's on my, I get it on email.
Yeah. So we say, listen, you're free to say what you want. You're free to write what you want, right? We will not take a position on these issues
As a university.
as a university or as a leadership group, and we will always guard the university's interests. And that's what, you were asking about institution building earlier. One was the point I made about governance and leadership. The other is, everyone who's involved in an institution building effort has to focus on the institutional interest. It's very easy for me to also write my political opinion as, an Ashoka founder or trustee, and I can easily have multiple opinions. But as a founder and trustee, I have to make sure that whatever I say does not reflect in any way on the university. And as long as that's what we try to drive home at every stage. And if anything somebody says starts to harm the university's reputation, then we go out on the front foot and bat, and we say, no, we are Ashoka, we are interested in scholarship, we are interested in academia.
It's the reputation, but it's also the environmental aspects.
Correct.
I mean, you deal with the government.
Correct. And the truth is that the world is very polarized right now. As you know, you say right, other people will say left. You say left, other people will say right. That will happen.
No, now it's more complicated. Now, if you say right, you are not right enough. If you say left, you are not left enough.
Yeah.
So there is sufficient argument within there.
See, Shekhar, we've all grown up in India. We've all built businesses. I grew up in Bihar during Jayaprakash Narayan's movement. I've seen regimes come and go, political movements come and go. I think if you're building an institution, you have to focus on the institution. You focus on what you're here for. We are here to recruit the best faculty. We are here to ensure the best outcomes for our students. We are here to make sure that the experience on campus is outstanding for anybody who comes there. And as long as we remain focused on that, people will say what they have to say.
So, shuru mein, I used to get rattled when something happened and some controversy happened on Ashoka. But now, after 10 years of Ashoka, I've kind of realized that, look, this too shall pass. So carry on working.
So how
And
did
I
you...
think your intent has to be right. I think we are very committed to the fact that we are, at the end of the day, a neutral platform, and that's very important. We're not, political in any way. We don't want to get politicized, and there will be incidents. We have had incidents. We have leading scholars. They have opinions. They write. But at the end of the day, as Pramath said, we safeguard the institution, and our intent is pure in terms of what we want.
Should faculty members be public intellectuals?
I think they are.
It's their choice. You can't stop them, right?
Yeah.
And वो खुद नहीं बनते, लोग बनाते हैं उनको.
नहीं वो ठीक है.
But if something they say or write reflects badly on the university, then we will have...
So what is it that somebody would say or write that could reflect badly on the university?
It could be a piece of research that is not well founded. It could be an opinion which is not grounded in what constitutes a university's position on something, right? If obviously a faculty member or a student does a well-researched piece, or a paper gets published, or a piece of research happens, then the university has to stand by it. But if it is just public opinion, if you're writing op-eds, if you're just saying something on television, But if you are making allegations, if you are making statements which are not grounded in top-notch scholarship and academic work, then obviously we have to say, listen, that's not who we are. This is not Ashoka, right? And that's all we do.
So how did you watch these protests in the US, which ultimately led to so many of these presidents, vice chancellors in the Indian context, losing their jobs, public hearings at the Congress, in a way public humiliation that all of us watched and wrote about and spoke about. How did you watch that? What lessons did you learn from that?
I think, my personal thing, I watched with some trepidation. कि हमारे यहाँ ना हो रहा है, लेकिन नहीं हुआ. And that is a good thing. It's not as we did anything proactively to control it. It just didn't happen. Right? I think people are not invested enough in what is going on there to actually do very much.
Ashish, how did you ensure that Gaza did not break out on your streets?
It's not so much a Gaza issue per se, but I think it's more, I think for me, the takeaway was, look, we all think that the US is a place where you can do whatever you want, write whatever you want, protest whenever you want. I think what last year showed us is that may not be the case.
Yeah, there are limitations.
There are limitations everywhere, including in the US. Everybody
in fact, those protests, I believe, fed into the Trump campaign.
Possibly, yes.
I think in our case, we've engaged with both students and faculty whenever these things have come up. These issues did come up this happened around the time when we were having our convocation. Some people did want to carry placards.
Yes.
Some people did carry placards. It was on TV, it was on Twitter. We just explained to people that, listen, you're free to do what you want, but this is a convocation, it's a celebration. Do you really feel so strongly that you would like to mar this with these kind of protests? And so some people participated, but it was actually very light and did not really significantly impact us. And similar, we have other Gazas, right, that happen and will come up. Our approach has been to engage and to say, of course,
see, 60% of Ashoka's graduates end up working in the corporate sector.
More.
Maybe more. I
80%.
think Ashoka students, by and large, are focused on their future. Right? It's also the truth that the full fee of Ashoka is not low. And if a significant chunk of students are paying that full fee, or near the full fee, even at 25 or 50% off, you are not there to spend an extra year, protesting. You will be focused. So compared to what might have otherwise happened had you been charging public university fees, I think we were covered there as well.
Public universities are now under other kinds of controls. That said, the basic phenomenon that all of us have been through, that in college everybody is a Marxist, right? Once you graduate, you go and work for Goldman Sachs or whoever. So we all become capitalists. How do you deal with that phenomenon? You can't recruit students and say, from now onwards you shall wear a. I've seen that in many private universities, by the way, particularly private universities run by, I shouldn't be sounding judgmental, but it's a statement of fact. Say real estate czars, the uniforms for students, and I see these owners calling themselves chancellors and sitting in their office. I find the full wall in front of them with different monitors, looking at every part of the campus, including the entrances of their hostels, and you can see these are very controlled spaces, extremely controlled spaces, and I'm sure they are not cheap. So that is one way of controlling any of this. But yours is not like that. Yours is a free university.
Yeah, given the kind of university you wanted to build, I don't think we can have that.
No, I'm saying that you don't have that, but still, how do you then manage that young people will have strong opinions? They should.
But precisely that, Shekhar, when there is a reaction from the external world to what somebody might say or do, then we engage equally with the external world to explain that these are young people. They don't mean any harm. This is not the university's position. We are a university where we give freedom to people to say what they want, and therefore that this should not be seen as something that we are indoctrinating.
And what do you say
No,
to
and Shekhar, I wouldn't say it that way. I mean, I went to college. I was probably left of center when I was in college. I think it left me with a strong social conscience, even though I went to Wall Street straight out of college and I became a hardcore capitalist. So I have, I'm not, you can't put me in a bucket in one sense. I mean, I'm a capitalist.
I'm just putting a before and after.
And I think that happens with a lot of students because when you're in college, you're experimenting, you're getting used to certain views. You may be a little bit more left of center when you're in college. But I think as you graduate, as you get into the real world, you maybe start to appreciate the benefits of the markets, of the system, which you may have criticized a little bit when you were in college. And I think you end up with a balance somewhere.
Is that a conversation you have with your students sometimes?
About
Not necessarily. I think we let them
faculty.
form their own opinions. I think for each of them, they form their own opinions and it's their own journey that they will go through.
So I think the key is to expose the students to as many different courses, faculty,
points of view
as possible. Now, one of the things that we did was that we said, okay, 60-65% of students are going into the corporate sector anyway. Why don't we increase the number of courses offered by the Center for Entrepreneurship so that they are better prepared for the workplace, right? Now, to run these courses, we've got visiting faculty from outside from the corporate sector, right? Now, that's a whole new body of thought coming in. Students are getting exposed to it. So yeah, they might be, left of center somewhere emotionally, but they also get exposed to these courses. They're much more practical and they're relevant to what the kind of work they'll be doing. So people, can choose and pick and choose what they want to do and what they want to be. And the truth is that the 60-65%, 70% of Ashoka students who join the corporate sector very often don't come in the news end. So good news is not news, right? And therefore, so many people got placed here, so that is not news. But it happens.
It's the same man bites dog.
Absolutely. And nothing wrong with that. What I'm saying is that people somehow, therefore don't get the overall picture simply because it doesn't come out.
Although these days, dog biting man is a huge story because, because we are polarized. In India is now even polarized based on are you for dogs or against dogs.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Dog lovers versus.
Yeah, we got some mattresses for the winter for dogs who live downstairs, and we had another group come up and take them away, saying that this is so bad and you're encouraging more stray dogs to come in here. So even man biting dog is not a good enough definition now. Where is it a bigger challenge to have these conversations? Students or faculty?
It depends.
I mean,
it depends what topic.
I will not ask that question at 19 of the 20 private universities where I visit as a speaker or to give prizes or whatever. But at Ashoka, I would ask that question because you are a freer university.
So actually, I've never had that conversation with faculty or students, honestly, because I feel at the end of the day, they're free-thinking, smart human beings, and even the faculty are not trying to indoctrinate them. They're giving them a good education. They're showing them different points of view. And ultimately, the students will read a lot. They'll form their own opinions. They'll interact not just with the world inside with Ashoka, but the external world. And that's how all of us were shaped. So I think we should respect our students and allow them to be who they are.
So from where have you seen more of a pushback? Students, faculty, investors, donors?
Pushback on what though, Shekhar?
Pushback on any issue, on a controversy. You're not taking a position on this, you're not taking a position on that. Why are you asking so-and-so to leave?
No, let's talk about real issue.
Yeah,
I'll be candid. So, abhi हाल ही में 6 महीने पहले शायद, it was this thing, there was a bunch of students protesting, we want a caste census.
Right.
Okay. Now, caste census for us, see, we will follow the law. First thing. The law does not require caste census. There is no caste-based reservation in private universities. There is, of course, Haryana domicile reservation, which we follow. So our position was we will follow the law. If the law says do it, we'll do it. Otherwise, look, it's a small campus. Aapko karna hai sense, aap khud kar lo. You can ask people their caste, they'll tell you. Now, was there a conversation between the administration and the students? Yes, there was. Did the founders get involved? No. It was, the dean, the vice chancellor, the pro-vice chancellor who spoke to the students. We do it through the administrative structure. That's the way the university runs. We can't
So
bypass.
it is issue dependent, I think, which is why it's not that we are trying to hedge the question. And we obviously don't try to we stay away from getting engaged ourselves, but I think you mean the university as such, the university administration.
The institute.
Yeah,
Well,
so-
I mean, administration and you as the founders, because
Yeah, so
ultimately
देखिए.
you are the guardians of the brand.
So ये जो था कास्ट बेस्ड रिजर्वेशन में 3,000 लोग हैं कैंपस में 35 लोग कर रहे थे. Or 1%.
Even fewer actually, Sanjeev. Yeah. So I
So
think,
it's not a large sort of thing.
yeah. So in that conversation, for example, faculty were not involved, but it was to pick up on your question. That was one of the issues where there was pushback, right? There may be some other pushback, when there was an issue with a faculty member's paper or a presentation and how it was perceived. It was much more with faculty.
You want to go a little bit into that faculty member's paper, because many sides of that have come out. Is there your side to it?
So look, there was a paper published. There was a committee set up by the
This is
governing
the
body.
economics paper.
That's right. That committee only had PhDs in it. It is not as if there was Ashish and me on the committee, right? It only had PhDs in it. There were protests. It was resolved by the vice chancellor speaking to the faculty. Again, founders did not speak to the faculty. See, you got to understand that faculty respect other faculty more than they respect founders. Because they will respect other scholars. They will respect.
Yeah, founders are rich people who respects rich people in India. In any case,
No, Shekhar, on that one, our position was very simple. That paper was published, it got a lot of attention on social media. We felt it was unwarranted. It was not the university's position. Why was the university being attacked? Right? And we defended the university. And at the same time, we asked a group of faculty members to engage with that faculty member. This was the governing body's decision.
what was the patron's view on that faculty member leaving? Would you rather that he had left or that he had stayed on?
I think that was ultimately his choice.
Yeah, that was ultimately his
So
choice.
I think,
Yeah.
what would you rather?
Honestly, I'd rather that Ashoka does his work quietly, diligently, and doesn't come on the news. Okay, but look, that's out of my control.
Yeah, I think it distracted from the larger scholarship that is happening at the university, and it was a distraction, and it put us out in the wrong light. There is 169 other faculty members who are doing great work, right? And to put our whole quality, research, everything to question on something that was perhaps positioned in a way that was unwarranted is my personal view. It could have been published in a journal. It could have gotten the reviews that it needed. It didn't have to go out on Twitter the way it did.
So, well, Twitter has now not gotten any better with Elon Musk, right? I'm saying it, I'm the recipient of most heavy-duty trolling, maybe among the top 10 in the Indian media.
Sure.
And I'm saying that it's much worse than before. So
Yeah.
I don't know how seriously you want to take it. But before I come to the last question, each one of you take a minute and speak about what you've learned over these 10 years. Pramath, you first. 10 years of Ashoka.
I have learned personally that the interest of the institution as a whole is something that has to be always kept in mind. And sometimes it's difficult to figure out what is the institution's right interest and best interest. So if we are going to build this into something that is going to outlive us, then we have to be very clear what we are trying to do and steadfastly focus on that. I believe all my colleagues in the founder group are very clear that we want to build India's finest university. Everything else is a distraction. And which is why, while some of the questions you're asking about the controversies or whether it is safe, not safe, what we face, honestly, I find it all a distraction. Because we are very clear, if you're going to build
Distraction is a part of institution building.
Absolutely.
You've got to deal with.
Absolutely. So for me, it's very clear that we are building India's finest university. For that, we have to focus on creating the best outcomes for our students, the best
And for you to
environment.
become the best, where do you see the competition coming from? Public universities or other private universities?
I don't think there's any competition, because not because I'm trying to be arrogant and be it sounds pretentious, but because there's so much room for many more, right? If it's only when there were few people.
No.
Yeah.
If you want to be the best,
Yes.
Where is the competition, or is the competition Ivy League and Oxford, Cambridge?
Yes, of course. It's international. The top ranked universities internationally, because our ambition is to be globally top 100 ranked.
So look, in a country 1.4 billion people, right? If it takes you 99.9% in class 12 to get into an SRCC, even if Ashoka is at 99.7%, you're still getting the best students, right? Sheer population does it for us, and sheer demand does it for us. Our challenge is different, and I keep arguing with Ashish and about this actually. How do we make Ashoka more financially inclusive? Right? What can we do to put together a corpus where we say, hey, listen, you know what? We can charge half the fees we're currently charging, or maybe 1/3 the fees we're currently charging, say 5 years out. If you do that, you will have solved much more problems.
That's exactly the opposite of what you're expecting your investing companies to be doing.
So that their founders become donors.
Yeah. Ashish, learnings over 10 years.
I think the learnings have been, one is that, you have to start with very high standards from day one and stick to them. Because if you want to build a top class institution, you have to focus on recruiting the very best faculty and ensuring we have a high bar for students coming in, or even building a new PhD program. How do we make sure the bar is really high? Not easy to build a top class PhD program in India. So high standards are very, very important.
You have your first PhDs coming out now.
Yes. And they placed well. But I would still say that the best students in India still go abroad for PhD. How can we turn the tide is the question. I don't think we've solved that as yet, but that is the ambition. So high standards, very, very critical. I think a second is that, this is a complex institution, and that working with other stakeholders is critical. I mean, it's really, you hear about these media stories or incidents when there is possible friction between students and management or founders and faculty. But I would say 99.9% of the time, which is on an everyday basis, actually things work very well. The reason we are where we are is because this is a collaborative project between all these stakeholders. And so I think that we need to stick to that going forward. It's not one stakeholder group versus another. A third one is that you need a lot of resources. This issue of 25 crore, there's no way. I think actually you need...
It burns cash.
It burns not only every year, but you need to build physical infrastructure, put money into research, put money into scholarships. Financial access. So this is eventually like a 10,000 crore project. It's not a 25 crore project. So raising resources. I think, why did the American universities pull away from the German ones? It's, of course, America rose and that helped, and the world wars helped. But it's really the fact that they put much more money behind it. Look at the endowments in America. So resources are very, very critical. So I think those are some of the learnings.
And Sanjeev, that is presuming you will learn anything.
No, I think in one word, patience. You got to be patient. You got to keep at it. Samay lagega. And then you got to think multi-generational.
Because there has to be a reason, and any of you can take this question, there has to be a reason why other fine ideas like, say, South Asian University or Nalanda, they floundered. But touchwood, you've actually done quite well. You've flowered, you are now prospering intellectually, academically.
It's the governance, Shekhar, right? I mean, who runs those universities? How are they run? How are decisions taken? I think it really boils down to that. I mean, that if I had to pick one reason, there may be other reasons.
Quality of leadership, quality of governance, commitment, staying with it.
Staying the course.
And competence.
One had Amartya Sen, the other had Dr. Manmohan Singh's patronage. But
But they didn't have the same degrees of freedom as a private
It's about
institution.
who is full time.
Yeah. And the point Ashish made is not a trivial one when it comes to building educational institutions. See, everybody wants to build a world-class institution. But if you're not world-class from day one, you can't scale quality. You can scale numbers. I think media is similar, right? If you are not of a certain benchmark level from day one when you started the print, if you started here and said over time मैं वहाँ पहुँच जाऊँगा, वो कभी नहीं होगा, कितना भी आप कोशिश कर लो. So that is where people make the mistake. They think that starting small also means starting at a okay quality and then I'll build quality over time. That's the logical mismatch that happens, disconnect that happens when you're being entrepreneurial. छोटा शुरू कर लेते हैं और फिर इसको अच्छा कर लें, वो नहीं होता. So, but then being really top notch from day one, and that's a topic of a whole other episode with you. How do you make sure that from day one, with no legacy, no background, no credibility, that you start at the top?
Yeah. And finally, did you want to add to this? What is it?
No, I just wanted to say the other big learning for me, Shekhar, has been that, there are now, which wasn't the case. It happened when Delhi School of Economics, was at its heyday, that some of our top people who got PhDs abroad, including Dr. Singh and others, came back to these institutions. It didn't happen.
Dream team of Indian economics.
Yes, and then for several decades, that didn't happen. I would say that the tide has started to turn again. And that's the other sort of big trend that we are benefiting from, but I believe many others will benefit from it. So it's not just Ashoka. I'm hopeful that many other private institutions will do well going forward.
So will you name some of the other private institutions that you treat with respect or that you might see as competition?
I think there are many. It's not a question of competition. I think we want all to succeed. I think India needs all of them to succeed. Hopi Jindal has a fantastic law program and has done well as an institution.
Yes.
Shiv Nadar University started before us, has done well. Flame was a college, became a university, has done very well.
I was their convocation speaker last year.
Yeah. So there are several. I would say,
So I'll tell you, when we were beginning to have conversation about Ashoka in 2007, 2008, we outlined about 8-10 foundational principles. One of them was this understanding that, look, India, if one thing succeeds, it gets cloned, right? So government started 5 IITs and then there were 4,000 engineering colleges because the IIT graduates succeeded. Likewise for the IIMs. We said if we build one Ashoka, there will be others who will copy us. If we make it work, then others will copy us, and we must encourage that.
Don't say copy, say others will be inspired.
Inspired.
Okay, they will emulate us.
Editorial correction.
Okay, and we must encourage that.
Yeah.
So we open our doors to anybody who comes. I want to set up a liberal arts university like yours. We say, come. We show them the whole thing, show them how we do it, and some of them have gone out and done it. So we want 20 Ashokas, 50 Ashokas, 100 Ashokas.
Chinese example, that should be the last one. What did the Chinese get right and India not? Because now we see all this research that's coming out that the Chinese were perhaps smart at investing more in STEM and less in social sciences. Was that an error India made? Is there something to this or it's more complex?
Well, actually, India has done a tremendous job of the IITs and engineering colleges. And the entire Indian IT industry and the IT revolution has been built on that. So India has done something very well.
That's different from doing cutting edge stuff, from producing. I mean, look at the Chinese. Even stuff that I follow closely, say defense, they are now producing 5G, 6G. You might say they are re-engineering old engines, but they are re-engineering old engines. We've been making the Sukhoi 30 MKI, I think for 30 years now, or about that long. We can't make that engine, right? So there's something the Chinese have done.
No, I agree. No, full marks to them. But I'll tell you something. We invest in startups. Okay, we as InfoEdge, the company, and thus far we've invested in 120 startups, and we invested 1 or 2 more every month. In order to invest in 3 startups in a quarter, or we see 1,000 startups, right? And some of the stuff I'm seeing in deep tech, in AI, in defense tech, in space tech, will actually go out and do good stuff maybe 10 years from now. So I think it's changing, but agle 10-20 साल में बदलेगा.
Ashish knows much more about China, so I'll let him have the last
Ashish.
word. But I just want to say that one thing that I have found very different about the way the Chinese approached it is that they focused on a few universities and really tried to make them big. They had this very famous C9 program, which then became the C32 program, which was that we'll get 9 universities in the top 100 and we'll throw all resources that are required to get those 9 into the top 100.
Including getting foreign faculty.
Whatever it takes. And then they said, okay, we've got these 9, now let's make these 32 into the top 100, right? And of course, then there is trickle down and they fix the whole system. But the first thing they really did was focus on that.
These were full scope universities.
Absolutely.
Unlike
Full
our
scope,
IITs.
yeah.
Because we did something similar with IITs. There were 5 and then there were more. And
but we
NITs.
didn't let them expand.
Yeah,
We
but
followed
these
the
are full scope universities.
That's right.
Ashish?
Yeah, I'll add to what Pramath is saying. I think firstly, there's this Carnegie classification of universities where R1 are the top tier universities in any country, which are really the research universities, which produce PhDs, which are the ones that produce future leaders, and over-investing in those. So I think while we do it to some extent in India, we don't do it to the same extent as China has done it. And neither are they full-fledged universities versus being technical institutes. So that's one difference. 2 is having a very concerted program, what you were pointing out, this 1,000 talent program, the sea turtles, which China did to bring them back home. They targeted the top people in PhD programs at institutions in the West and made it attractive for them to come back. And we've talked about it in India, but we haven't done it in the same mission mode that the Chinese did it. And a third has been a very long-term commitment to these institutions. They know that these things take decades. You're not going to become world-class. Tsinghua, the investment started 30, 40 years ago. And then it's finally overtaken MIT in many fields. So it was a long journey. It's not something that happened overnight. And they stuck with it for that long period of time. And they always, I admire their leadership. They also picked very good leaders for these institutions. People who are presidents of these universities are truly impressive.
Generally let them be.
Yeah. And generally let them be. And it's, while we look at success in STEM, let me give you another example. Take a field which you know well, like international relations. In China, there's 75 institutions that have good IR or reasonable IR departments and about 1,100 scholars.
I get correspondence from them.
Yeah.
I get questions from them. I get outreach from them. And I envy them. And I hate them. I say hate them. I hate them in the sense that, why is this not happening in my country?
And
my country is large. It has aspirations. There's nobody studying America in India.
No, so Shekhar, we have an IR international relations program at Ashoka that we're quite proud of. But if you look at Indian institutions, if I compare with that 1,100 in China, people of equal quality in India, it's probably 50 or 70. So we're punching well below our weight and we haven't invested in this. So I think it's a question of excellence, it's a question of investment, it's a question of good leadership, and it's a question of staying the course for a long period of time.
To stay the course, you have to make a beginning, which you guys have done. And I have to say that you are 3 brilliant, well-meaning human beings with your hearts in the right place, but a lot of recklessness in your head. Because who starts a university? So,
Thank you.
So I used to know an old Vice Chancellor, Dr. Amrik Singh, who's older than us, Punjab University. So he wrote his memoir. So he would reach out to me when he was writing his memoir, Beta main ki karan, hun ki karan. Finally, he asked me for a title. So I said, Ji, aapne panga kyun liya tha? So I think the title of his memoir was Asking for Trouble, which is to be a Vice Chancellor in India. And I think that book came out more than 20 years ago. So to set up any educational institution, particularly when your motive is not profit, either legally or not so legally, because legally you can't make profit, is a challenging thing. So thanks for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And compliments for staying the course. I know the challenges, and challenges will keep, as the institution grows, challenges will become bigger, as now Harvard and Penn and Columbia have seen. So thank you very much for finding the time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.